Correct. I'm sorry.
Or I was just saying yes.
Okay. We are going to open up this evening with public comment. We have it limited for 1 hour, 3 minutes per comment. If folks would like to start that, you'll need to raise your hand and we will call on you and unmute you. Richard Hendrick.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Super. Thank you. Last Tuesday evening, the night of the debate, I observed within your deliberations focus, humility, wisdom, respect, listening, and even emerging smiles. Thank you for that. Yes, do place your deliberations in Spanish and captions for those who cannot hear. Honor those revolutions. You did not make the mistake of Minneapolis by getting bogged down with the rallying cries, while at the same time powerfully putting meaning to those cries by overlaying them upon the committees formed. Abolish, reimagine, reform. My concern is not with the right word for my position, but rather for making this happen. Do the work and then name it. I would suggest you need a fourth committee, perhaps called Who to Communicate to and How to Do It. Like the Kerner report of 50 years ago, yours too will sit on a desk unless you have considerable support behind it, and that will take communication. Find a way to those 500 in the streets, to the 500 who have reached out to you. This is not the future. They are now. Your task really is going to be to step out of the box that I think you may feel that you've been placed into to some extent. In the end, you're going to have to convince the mayor, the city council, the populace at large, those 500, and that's going to be some doing. But do it. Last week, this week is the week of Mental Health Awareness Week. A comparison was made between the institutionalization movement of the 50s and 60s, people released from the state hospitals, and this movement. Whatever we end up polling this movement, this was not an apt comparison, well intended, but not apt and somewhat concerning. The deinstitutionalized movement brought forward an irrational fear. Where are the safety nets? This movement has engendered outrage. The police safety net is gone. I was part of the deinstitutionalization movement, worked in the state hospitals, and for 25 years thereafter served those affected people on the streets. Notwithstanding the continuation of the disgraceful lack of support, no housing, inappropriate police intervention, however well intended, bringing folks to jails, they, including the severely mental illness, are infinitely safer and healthier on the streets. What remains with me are the courageous sentiments and actions of the U.S. District Court.
Sorry, a few minutes.
I'm ending it, yeah. Of Judge Joseph Toro. Joseph Toro back then said, "This is too important, too cruel to wait anymore." He mandated a consent decree. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is a telephone number, 413-582-7081. One more time, 413-582-7081. I'm going to move to the next person, Ed Olmsted.
Dana, can you make me a co-host?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you all for serving on this commission. I want to say I believe that an open, purposeful examination of policing with community input in Northampton is one step that can build community consensus on how we manage this citizen, but for the benefit of all citizens, the city. A system that operates in such a way that specifically assures people of color the patterns of injustice and immunity from prosecution we have all witnessed nationally will be actively rooted out here. I am encouraged by your listening, reading, consideration of the issues, and I believe you'll provide important leadership for the city. I wanted to voice one thing that's been on my mind for a while, concern of mine. I'm concerned about where the services that employees of the police department perform might be shifted. And I'm particularly concerned about whether employees who are or will be providing those services the police have been performing are working in jobs that have similarly solid wages, chances for advancement, respected career status, fair workload or productivity expectations, ample sick time, family time, vacation time, holiday time, chance of overtime or other salary enhancement, rules about time between shifts, broad coverage, health insurance, employee matching retirement investments or pension plans with a range of investment choices, etc. I don't know that our police officers receive all of these benefits, but I do believe they are reasonable conditions to promote for employees to whom any responsibilities are or will be shifted. I wonder if those who are providing such things as housing stability, addiction prevention and treatment, outreach to individuals, staffing 24-hour phones or staffing facilities that operate 24 hours a day are employed in positions that substantially meet the criteria I just mentioned. Some facilities or agencies are more able to provide those employment conditions, but I believe that many are not. I hope that a plan will be put forward that prioritizes assuring that any shifts in responsibility, either intentionally or by default, from a workplace, the police department that nationally is predominantly white and higher status, to workplaces with more women and people of color, will raise up those who have been working for lesser compensation, benefits, etc., and also ensure that those taking on these responsibilities have a substantial voice in work conditions through the benefit of a union. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dana Goldblatt.
Hi, my name is Dana Goldblatt. I live in Northampton, and I just wanted to remind the committee, because I do feel this got a little bit lost last week when I was listening and all of the conversations about how to form subcommittees and what subcommittees might discuss, that the main reason that you have been convened is because hundreds and hundreds of people in Northampton feel so strongly about abolishing the police that they came to meeting after meeting after meeting demanding immediate abolition. So this is an abolition committee in every way that matters. And what you will inevitably discover is that most of what the police do can simply be abolished. They are not mostly providing services to homeless people. They are not mostly providing services to mentally ill people. They do occasionally show up and yell at people when they get calls that are complaints, but we can just stop that behavior. We can simply abolish it. There's not a ton of services that are being provided. And I want us to make sure, and I want you to make sure that you're not sort of falling prey to the propaganda, which is that the police are fulfilling all of these really essential functions, and that if they go away, those functions won't be served. So there are some functions they serve. For instance, if you want to be fingerprinted to become like a nurse, you have to go to the police department. No one else does that. So you're going to have to figure out a way for people to get fingerprinted to become nurses in Northampton, right? Because they do background checks. So Someone's going to have to do that. Things like that will have to be replaced. But for the most part, you're just talking about abolition. And I want to make sure that that's clear and that's in the forefront of everything that you're thinking about as you watch what the police do. And not just listen to the police say like, oh, mostly we deliver groceries to homeless veterans who have puppies. Like, that is not what police do. You don't need to worry so much about replacing the grocery delivery to the homeless veterans with puppies. Not mostly what they do. So again, just please keep your eye on the prize here. It's abolition. And once you've abolished the police, there will be these few functions that they did a little bit. And there will also be a lot of money left to do really different things that will really benefit the community. And those are separate. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose Adestra.
Hi. I'd like to echo everything that the previous speaker just said. I live in Northampton. I'm a father of 3. And this is about abolition, to create a more equitable future for people of color and for houseless folks. I do a lot of organizing in town, and tell you what, all the cops do is escalate the situations and make people that are in a mental health crisis more aggravated. It's been years of harassment, and there were hundreds of us coming over and over again organizing, and that's not going to stop. So I would really, encourage it to be a committee that is really centered around abolition and providing some sort of solution and quickly, because the police, I feel like a little bit powerless in this committee because the police are still actively trying to round up the homeless people less than a mile that way. And that seems like there's nothing we can do. And they're putting media out like Dana's saying, we have puppies now, everything is fine, we're delivering groceries. That's ridiculous. So police, I would love for the movement to be abolition centered.
Thank you. One more time for 413-582-7081. Okay. That was our last person. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. We can move into the rest of our agenda. First item is approval of minutes from the September 22nd meeting. Has everyone been able to review those? And if so, would anyone like to motion to approve those?
Motion to approve.
Alex is raising their hand.
Alex,
I was just going to move to approve.
thank you.
Like a
So I can
second?
second instead.
Second. Do we need to vote on that to approve them?
Yes.
Okay. Shall we? We will vote on that. I will go down the list. Lois.
Yes.
Is Elizabeth here yet? Yes.
Yeah.
Hi. Booker.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Is David here yet? No. Alex.
Yes.
Carmen.
Yes.
Javier.
Yes.
Dana, yes. Nandi.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Josie.
Yes.
Cynthia.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Is Larissa here? No. Okay. So that is approved. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of accessibility, language translation, captioning, and transcription. We have been able to get the closed captioning on the screen. And I believe we are, and I think also when the meeting ends, the transcript is in English, and I think we are trying to figure out how we might get that translated. Is that true, Dan?
Yes. So we're still waiting to hear back from the ITS department. And we're waiting for Director Pagan to hear back about the technical side of having translations. The city does, and this is a quote from the mayor, just that the city does utilize services from the UMass Translation Center on occasion, as well as in-house translation by bilingual staff. If there's a specific, or if there are specific translation services that the commission requires, we can request those be provided or contracted by the city, utilizing a request process to the mayor and council president.
Thank you, Dan. Javier?
Dan, I don't know if I heard you well. He said that translation being done by staff of the city, like employees?
Yeah, that they utilize UMass's translation center.
No, after the one that he mentioned after that. He says people from the city. Is that correct? I just want to check if I heard well.
That is correct. It's on occasion, as well as using in-house translation by bilingual staff.
Does that mean that they have, I want to point out something here. Dan, that means that they have in-house interpreters, or they profit out of bilingual people who already have a job description and duties, and they have to do stuff, and those are the ones who they randomly select to do that. You don't have to answer that, but sort of.
Yeah. So like the only thing I can say is that that's just the direct quote, and that's all the information. So I don't know if there are folks who, as part of their job, do translations of city documents. I would assume that seems like a pretty important task, but I don't know about how things are managed, so I can't give like any other explanation, but I can check in again.
Okay, it's just I want to flag that if in some this is, you see a lot of this in different school district, right? The a teacher meets with the mother and the father, and they made the child interpreter, right? It's not the same, but it's similar, because at the end of the day, it's one of the interested parties. I would personally, absolutely against that. If we're gonna have an somebody interpreting, it has to be a person that has training, that knows how to do it, and is being compensated in an appropriate way for that ability of being bilingual, because that's a totally different professional skill.
We will ask for clarification on that. Thank you. Lois?
I brought up when I first brought it up, I think it was in the first meeting, that there's this Google Translate program, and I've seen it used by the Worker Center. And so you buy the program, and it costs $1,000 to buy it, and any department of the city can use it, not just us. And then you hire a translator. I'm not sure if this is true, but when I spoke to the Worker Center, I think they said that they use something called Just Translation. I could be wrong. I didn't write it down. And they pay the person or people doing that $50 an hour. And I still would like to see the city investigate that so that we can have simultaneous translation. I'm suggesting in Spanish at minimum for the hearings, and hopefully for more, depending on what the budget is. So that's still my suggestion, and I hope that somebody, I don't know who that is at the city, since there's no staff person yet, investigate that.
Thank you, Lois. Is it okay to move on to the next topic? The commission budget and resources discussion. What is available and how do we request and allocate? We did reach out to the mayor. I'm sorry, I have an off-centered washing machine that someone else turned on and it's extremely loud. So I apologize for that if you can hear that. But what is available and how do we request and allocate money? I think the answer that we got to that is that anything that we request outside of the staff person, we need to request it from the mayor and city council, and they have to approve that. So anything outside of our staff person who we don't have yet. Are there any questions about?
That means that we would have to write a proposal and go and present it in front of the city council for voting approval?
I have asked for clarification about what exactly that process is. So if there's a proposal, if there is an application or what have you, and I don't have an answer to that yet. Yes, Lois.
Oh, I thought that when I first brought this up, and it was at the first meeting when the mayor was here, he said that there was a $25,000 budget for the commission, and that some portion of it would go for the salary of the staff person, and that the other money, whatever that is, was for, I mean, not that we would be, going around spending it for no reason, but that we could spend some of that money. And that's when I suggested both the translation services, the Google thing and the translator, and also when I suggested that we might want to hire an independent counsel, and that both of those things, if we could see what the amount of money is and allocate some money to that, then we would know what we're dealing with. So I still put those two things out there based on this, what he said about this $25,000.
So just to clarify, and I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand because I'm a co-host. I think Carmen is in the same boat and also trying to raise her hand. The $25,000 is the budget for the staff assistant position. That's all of that money is for that staff assistant for 9 months. So the additional, there is no additional funds. Everything, if we need it, needs to be requested basically ad hoc. I can read the mayor's response, which is that only the funds appropriated to date for the Northampton Policing Review Commission is $25,000 to fund the administrative assistant position. In terms of additional funding needed by the commission, I wouldn't presume a specific budget number without understanding what additional resources you felt you needed. For the most part, our boards and commissions, staffing is the single largest support cost. Some of our quasi-judicial bodies, i.e. the planning board, also have funds budgeted for the cost of mailing legal notices and legal advertising as required by law. Beyond that, funding requests are brought forward on an as-needed basis. So just to give clarity on that.
Thank you, Dan. Michael?
Well, I just wanted to say two things about it, which is that I kind of remember it the way Lois remembers it, in terms of the mayor saying, yeah, this money is set aside for a staff person, but maybe some other things as well. But I can say as a counselor, Counselor Jarrett and I, when Alex and I, when we sat with the council, the way the money was presented was for a staff person. So if there are other expenses that would need, you know, this group, this commission would not need to present that. We would present it, make the request to the mayor, and then the mayor would figure out where he wanted to try to move that money from to this commission's line, and then the council would have to approve that. But we wouldn't have to present it to anybody but the mayor, just through the form of a request, I believe. And I think that's Dan and Dana would handle that. I do think, just to be very clear, Lois, I thought when you brought up the translation idea and the independent counsel for this commission, it was the second week. The first week we did talk about the money with the mayor, but I thought you brought those up the second week, just so we have them in order. I think it's important because I don't think the mayor was there for that discussion when that came up. Because I thought that was, again, I thought that we talked about the money with the mayor the first week, and then you proposed those the second week. Maybe I don't remember it the first week. Maybe I'm wrong.
Thank you. Alex?
Dan and Michael answered most of what I was going to say, but yeah, and it did sound to me, my impression was that the mayor said that, the staff, there's 25,000 would be more than enough for the staff. And so we could potentially ask for some amount to be transferred to a different type of budget than a salary budget. And so then that transfer would be approved by the city council.
Thank you. Javier?
So I don't know if I understood well, going again to what Dan's reading of the mayor's response. So my take into this is that no, the city has not put any money besides the subtitling of that we have right now to any other kind of accessibility in any other committee across the city. That's what I'm getting. If I'm wrong, I would love to be corrected, because if he's mentioning different committees or different subcommittees, and that's what they have, and that's the money, and he mentions a couple of the reason why they would get extra money, and none of those extra reasons to get extra money talks about accessibility. I mean, certainly, that's a bigger issue. I see, I'm gonna change title, but Councillor Quillen nodding. And I think it's a bigger problem and a bigger issue, and I would like that if we do a proposal, to mention that in the proposal.
Thank you, Javier. Lois?
I'm sorry, Lois, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've had my hand
No,
raised. Can you
go.
please?
Oh.
No, it's okay. Can you please remove me as a co-host so in the future I can just continue to use the raise hand feature?
Yep. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought Carmen was going to speak, but you were just talking about the raise hand thing. Okay.
I just didn't want to interrupt you, but because sometimes we have our thoughts and we don't want to lose them, so I can go after you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't remember whether it was week 1 or week 2. I think it was week 1. But anyway, I'm just wondering how we proceed. Like, can we have a discussion about whether people think having these two things as part of either the 25,000 or an additional, whatever it turns out to be, whatever we estimate it might be, can we have a discussion about those things rather than like what people think about having the translation services? And again, I'm suggesting this Google thing just because I saw it work and I thought it was great. And also whatever amount of money that would be. And I don't know, like maybe we're talking about 5 hours of hopefully not too expensive lawyers' hourly rate as an amount of money to budget in. I mean, I don't know how to budget it. I know what I heard the Google thing was, which was $1,000 plus whatever number of hours we want to think about as what, as having simultaneous translation in Spanish. So maybe we can get on those two things instead of move on.
Thank you, Lois. Carmen and then Booker.
I don't want to keep going back to the translation, but I do believe that in the first week when the mayor had discussed the way I understood what he was giving us, the information he was giving us was that there was a portion that was allocated for an individual to be hired, and then whatever was left over could be used depending on what it was going to be used for. But I do believe the translation service has to be discussed. I know Google is great. I know I use Keylingo for myself. I know I speak Spanish, but as Javier was saying, a lot of times staff members within specific districts or that work for specific cities are used to provide translations, and it makes it very uncomfortable. And for the individual, like that is not what we do for a profession. We're using the translation that we were born and raised in. So that makes it very uncomfortable. You're doing two positions, which is not, it's really not professional, and the city should probably think about doing away with that. Translation should be done by someone who is a professional in that field. So I do think that there's two conversations that are happening right now, and they are correlated. So I wanna make sure that we're not moving away from the translation because it is important, and Spanish is not the only language that's spoken in Northampton other than English. Is a lot more. And I'm not sure how Google works, but I know Keylingo has like 112 languages that could be used. So I think it's something for us to revisit.
Thank you, Carmen. Booker, and then maybe if we can go back to maybe thinking about a proposal.
Well,
Sounds like
well, so actually what I want to say is, should we make a proposal? I think if we think this is important, then we should make a proposal. In medicine, thou shalt not use Google Translate as a way of talking to patients who speak a different language. You're also not supposed to use family members, and you're not supposed to use unpaid, uncertified interpreters. So we do have a variety of ways of dealing with that. I think the hard thing about making a proposal here is, are we only talking about Spanish, or are we also talking about English for people who can't hear? Or are there other languages we need to include in this conversation? Now, I actually, if you ask me, I would say what we need is Spanish, and perhaps an English translation bar running. I think there are places we can go to get a proposal about this. We can go to the IHI and see what they would recommend to us. Or we could, clearly what we're learning here is that the city is not where we think it should be in terms of offering these kinds of services. So we're going to need to make that kind of proposal to them for that. So I think if we think this is something we need, we should make a proposal to make a presentation at our next meeting of here are ways we think this should be done. And that's going to require outside of this committee work. And say we can, here's what Google Translate would be. Here's if we hired an individual and what that would cost. Or if there are other, we actually use something called Strata in medical interpreting, which so we can pull up any language we want whenever we want. But it's there's a big contract there that does that. So, but I think we need to get to a proposal, cost it out, find something that we would like that we then propose to the mayor, and then the mayor can decide whether they want to propose it to the council.
Thank you, Booker. I want to acknowledge Javier, but I also want to move on with whether or not we want to motion to propose. So Javier, and then we can do that.
Yeah, thanks. Just really short. I whoever moves the motion, I would like to point out we're already gonna be underpaying somebody to commit to 9 months part-time. Try to live with $25,000 in Northampton. You're not gonna get anywhere. So please, whoever creates a proposal, I would encourage you to have this proposal as a different amount of money to the $25,000 allocated. Whoever knows who the person who is going to be hired.
Thank you. Javier, every time you speak, it sounds like you're on the radio. I really love that. Would anyone like to motion to work on a proposal or a motion to move forward with a proposal? Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just actually have a question before we do that. I'm wondering, because of thinking about the undertaking of proper translation, as well as thinking about multiple languages, and also putting this in the context of a broader city problem around important commissions. I mean, this is a very important commission, but there are a lot that actually really deserve to have accessibility to the language that are spoken in the citizenry here. And I'm wondering if this is something that we actually propose to have the city council look at as a citywide problem that they can address, because it is looking for a service that, like the ones that were spoken of before, as a city contract, not just one for this specific committee, would actually be more cost benefit, probably be easier to cost out, and also would be one that we might be able to find someone that we could properly pay, but it would be for citywide commissions. So I'm wondering if we might actually ask or propose something like that instead of just for this particular committee. Just ask that it go back to the council as a request for a citywide issue to address.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Lois?
I just want to clarify that the translation thing that I was part of at this meeting, which was at the Worker Center, was not a mechanical translation. It was somehow a way that this Google program was used, and then there was an actual human being or human beings translated. So it wasn't like typing something into a computer and coming up with a computerized version of what was being said. I agree with Elizabeth. The only thing that I worry about is that the commission could come and go by the time this is resolved. And I don't know, we haven't talked about hearings and when they might happen and all that. So I just worry that by the time we dealt with it, perfectly for the whole city, that, like half the mandate of the commission time would be over. So that's I agree with you in theory. It's practice that I worry about.
Thank you, Lois. Michael? And then Nick, I saw your physical hand.
Yeah, I agree with Lois that it is time sensitive. One way to kind of beat that, I think, is for this commission here to go ahead and ask for it, to say that this is something we need. I also think it wouldn't be a bad idea for this commission to consider a resolution urging the city to create accessibility around meetings. I would encourage Booker to maybe look at that with the Human Rights Commission as well. And Alex, if you and I wanted to discuss that, I think that's something we could bring to the council as well in the form of a resolution, which would at least show the mayor that there are multiple bodies asking for this accessibility, That said, I agree with Lois. What you're talking about then is probably a good, 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks down the road before we get through this entire process. So, step one, I think this commission can go ahead and make a request for it. And then I think we, to try to get everybody pushing in the same direction to get the city to do this. Because I think this has been a fabulous discussion that I'm thrilled to have with all of you. And I think it's really important. Accessibility is so important right now on Zoom. The mechanical discussion of this, Lois, where you brought that up about how it's, we could, is there a system where we can at least, if someone doesn't speak English as their first language, they can read in their language on the screen. But accessibility is always a discussion amongst city committees and boards and so forth. For, I know this is a discussion that people have about in-person meetings as well. So this is something we need to, that I think as a group we can work on.
Thank you. Nick?
I don't have a raise hand option in my Zoom for some reason. I don't really understand why.
I'm going to take you off of co-host. That's why.
Okay. I want to just follow up what most everybody's been. Sorry, now can you hear me?
Sorry, I think when I unco-hosted you, then it did all of the unthings.
Okay. All right, so you can hear me now.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what I was saying is I agree with what Elizabeth started to recommend, and that is I think it makes sense that we ask for the city to provide a translation service for our commission, and recommend that in the process of doing that, they look at a translation service that could serve the whole city, and all the various groups. But I think we should keep the focus on our commission, and I think that we can ask for it to be done in a reasonable amount of time, and that we can ask them to look at what, either make a recommendation or look at what's best. But I really think that it's very reasonable for us to request that, and see where the mayor can fit it in, wherever he finds the fiscal means to do that. And I feel like we should make a motion towards that end, and focus on what our commission needs as a priority.
I second that motion. What happens next, friends?
I don't think we have a full motion made.
Do I have to state it in a particular fashion to make it a motion? I move that we request the mayor look into a Booker, go for it.
I move we form a subcommittee that will format a proposal to improve access for our meetings by investigating providing translation services for those that we determine to be necessary for this committee, with the plans of making a proposal to the mayor.
So I'll second that.
What next?
Now we have discussion.
Now we have discussion.
On that motion specifically.
That motion, thank you.
Could someone repeat who was the second on that motion?
That was Dan Kennedy.
Thank you.
Nick.
I'm just wondering if we want to have a subcommittee process, or if we don't want to, if it wouldn't be easier to just request the mayor, ask the mayor to come up with something. I'm not sure. I'm suggesting that. That's all.
Javier, and then Booker.
If in some point Booker can restate the motion, because I lost audio at that point.
Okay.
Would you like
Ma-
me to reread what I wrote down, Dr. Bush?
Please.
Okay.
Please.
Bob moved that we form a subcommittee that will format a proposal to improve access for our meetings by investigating providing translation services for those that we determine to be necessary for this committee, with a plan for making a proposal to the mayor.
So I was purposely open about not saying limiting ourselves to certain translation services. My understanding, and I would ask Michael and Alex to comment on this, the mayor prefers to get proposals for things and not to ask for, what do you think we can do? So I think we will need to make a somewhat formal proposal, perhaps even cost it out in order to make things work.
Thank you, Booker. Namdi?
Hi, I think just in support of Booker's motion, and in contrast to what Nick had proposed, it strikes me, just as a listener on this issue, that there's expertise in this group that might be lacking if we sort of just pass the ball over to the mayor's office and say, would you solve this problem? In other words, I heard some things voiced here that were fairly sophisticated about thinking about, the appropriateness of using city employees, issues about, not having conflicts of interest and who's doing the translating. There's just a lot of sort of thoughtful things that this group has. And so I guess I would like to see for this and for future processes where we have special expertise in this group that we, advantage that, form a subcommittee of people who are used to thinking about these things. Think about, translation in the course of their daily duties and already have sort of thought through, have experience with software, experience with this process, and then bring that into the proposal. So I definitely like that idea. But I guess I also want to raise as a second point, that as we begin to make requests that have financial consequences to the mayor's office, to be mindful that the resources are likely not infinite. And so as we begin to understand what it is that we might be requesting money for in the future. So for example, just to give one that's on my mind now, is if there's costs involved in doing future research. If we today in our agenda, we identify future things we'd like to know the answer to, and we have to pay somebody to get that information for us, to me, from where I sit, I see that as, highly central to our work. And so as we begin to propose things that have a cost value, what I like about Booker's proposal is it sounds to me that this is being framed as a expense that the city will incur for a range of city needs, but might not be viewed as, coming out of our, like we're not asking for a ton of money that would just be for us, essentially. And then when we do make requests for us, that those requests are really tied to the charge that we adopted. We can sort of link it directly to the content. There's just some thoughts about this. Again, I think all of this lines up in along with Booker's, but it's to me, everything I said fits with what the motion that's on the table. But I just wanted to add that piece about being thoughtful about when we make a financial request, it might limit future financial requests because resources are not infinite. I guess that's one thing to think about.
Thank you, Nandi. Javier?
I agree with Namdi, but I would add to that so the proposals that I have heard, Lois talk about maybe having an independent council that would be I'm assuming by the hour, and what we're talking right now about accessibility. These are sort of bottom line things to be able to function. I understand that being worried about start asking more and more, which I don't think we will do. But I have to say, I'm concerned that hopefully we're not the first committee or commission or whatever you want to call it, talking about that there are no accessibility things put in place in the city. Hopefully no. So I would say that if the commission feels that they need something to be able to do the work and for people to be able to have access to the information to the work, it's fair game.
Thank you.
Um,
So I think I'm hearing two different things: the council as well as translation. These are two things, correct? Did I hear council? Am I making this up?
I think you're correct. I think the motion on the table right now is about accessibility in translation services. So I think we have to kind of tackle this motion.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand, so I was waiting until everybody finished. But one thing that I also want to expand this to be, since we're using the word accessibility, and in one case we mean accessibility for people who speak different languages, but that we also, and this adds cost, but to be mindful of accessibility in terms of people with disabilities who can't necessarily hear, if they have audio impairments, or for documents that we create or produce, or that we even circulate, that those are accessible as well. So for people who use screen readers or keyboard navigation, that the documents are formatted correctly. Really, I have a friend who is blind, and navigating the city website is terrible for them. Like, there are documents that are just scanned images that he can't access at all. It just says image. So there is remediation that might be necessary as well. And those are things, when we're creating those documents, we can be mindful of it, but when we're processing them all. But having someone in the city city government looking at digital accessibility across commissions would be nice to add, if we're costing out that and we're using the phrase accessibility. I'd like that included for those broader things, and for our what we're putting out as well. Because I guess the way that I'm seeing this, we have two different potential requests, right? So one is a request for our own use that hopefully would be funded fairly quickly. If it's going to be funded, it would be fast. And then introducing the idea of, all of these accessibility issues to the city. And I don't think anybody's necessarily ignorant of these, but they are significant undertakings in terms of the logistics, in terms of contracts and compliance with privacy laws and everything else, and then ultimately funding them. So.
Thank you, Dan. Lois?
I was just listening to Dan. I was just wondering if there is an ADA compliance person in the city. I mean, some of the things that you just raised, Dan, I just wonder if there's somebody already that's part of their job, not necessarily the translation, but for people that are visually impaired or people that are hearing impaired. So I have no idea, but I just wonder, just because it's the city, but anyway, just another thought.
Good question. Thank you, Lois. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that along the same lines as, as a police commission review board. I'm wondering what the police department uses in terms of translation services. And I'm wondering if it's possible to just request some of those use the same service and from that department, some reallocation right there. I'm just wondering what the police use, because I imagine they have some requirement around translation or that sort of thing.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Alex?
I just wanted to respond to Lois's comment. So the city has a disability commission, and there is an ADA Section 504 coordinator. So that person staffs the commission, I believe. So that is, if we're thinking about that, we could bring in that person. Keith Benoit, it looks like his name is.
Thanks, Alex. Lois?
just back to what Elizabeth's question, I think that's a really interesting question, because I wonder what they do, not just in terms of, not necessarily as a resource for us, but just as part of policing practices and service. It seems like that's a good question just to flag in terms of going forward, looking at how the police function on a day-to-day basis with people that aren't using English as a first language.
Thank you. So, yes, Booker. Hi, Booker.
I saw briefly, I thought Laura Kranzler was wanted to say something. I saw her briefly raise her hand. So that's why I'm asking. There she is, back again. So
I was going to give the same information that Eric gave about the ADA coordinator being within the planning department and the CDBG director, one and the same. Thank you.
Booker.
So I think what this commission is going to do is it's going to change sort of the language and how the town begins to do things. I want to be careful about, I purposely use the word accessibility, and I chose not to use the word disability access, because people who are blind or otherwise, that's by the ADA, that's a disability. But people who speak Spanish as their primary language, that's not a disability. They're just sort of not included in the discussion. And that's why I want to stay away from the disability thing. I do want to say I really resonate with what Michael suggested about let's be selfish and get these services for us. And I will go back to the Human Rights Commission and get a resolution to go to the mayor to say, why aren't we doing this for across the city? And why is the council doing this? And, but I think I want to be selfish and get this for the commission as quickly as we can so we can get about our work. But this is, I think a lot of stuff is going to bubble up because of our discussions. And this is a real example. It's a real surprise example of what's going on, because it's not just about language. It's also about being fair and being professional of how we do this. So I do want to get this for us so we can get to the next place. And if I'm involved with this committee, I will call the police and say, by the way, how do you do this when you're speaking cross languages? And sort of what happens and what are their services to.
Thank you. Have no more hands up. How might we move forward with this?
Take a vote.
Take a vote. Let's take a vote. Thank you. Y'all are so helpful. Thank you. I will call the names. Lois.
Are we voting on Booker's?
Wait, yes. Booker, do you mind saying it?
If I would appreciate it, since time has passed, if Laura could just read that again before I vote on it.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you.
And, let's see. 1 second. Move to form a subcommittee that will format a proposal to improve access for our meetings by investigating providing translation services for those that we determine to be necessary for this committee, with a plan for making a proposal to the mayor.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was a child. Dan said yes. Nick said, Nick?
Yes.
Thank you. David?
Apologies for being late, and yes.
Thank you. I'm glad you can join us. Alex?
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Javier,
Yes.
Dana, yes. Namdi,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes.
and Larissa. I do not think she's with us. So that sounds like a resounding yes. So with that said, are there any other budget and resource discussions? Alex.
This was actually about that subcommittee. I wonder if those who are interested in serving on it could indicate that interest, and then the co-chairs would choose who would serve. I believe that's how it works, but that way we could have an opportunity to say whether we would like to be on it. Or that could happen later.
Yeah, maybe we can do that when we get to the subcommittees part of the conversation.
Great.
I will add that to the note so I don't forget. I don't think that y'all will though. Other commission budget resource discussions. I think the other thing was around private counsel. Lois.
Yes, that was the other thing that I suggested. And I don't know exactly. I think it would be good for us to have somebody independent counsel. Maybe we wouldn't need to use that person, but maybe we would. And I don't know how to do that other than to maybe guess or estimate how many hours that might be as an amount of money. And I don't know, we have to leave it to maybe some other people on the commission to give us a ballpark about what an hourly rate for that might be. So I would like to, I think it's important for us to have, or at least have the option of having.
Thank you, Lois. Javier?
I just want to voice that I agree with Lois. I think it would be important for us to have an independent legal voice in matters that we're discussing. As I said, maybe it's an option to do it hourly because we know that it's not. It's gonna be a limited amount of times that we're gonna be using it, but it still would be good to have it.
Booker.
Just for the sake of being transparent, could either Lois or Javier say out loud or explicitly why you think we might need counsel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we might have a question about the police or police contracts or union negotiations, or I don't know, many kinds of things, qualified immunity, all of those kinds of legal issues that could come up. And maybe the city attorney would be helpful, but the city attorney is also the city attorney. And so I'm thinking that maybe it would be good to have somebody who is non-affiliated, independent, be available to us if we have these kinds of questions that we want legal advice on. So that's my thinking. That's why I thought of it.
Yeah, same here. The idea, as we said, I like independent counsel who would not have any, would not be a participated role in the city or any other interested party. That's essential. Because you get because at the end of the day, as Lois said, it's the city's lawyer.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything around private counsel or thoughts? Feelings, emotions?
And sorry, Jose was first.
Is it Josie? Or
It's Josie. Yeah, no, I'm hearing it now. I definitely think that we are going, just the very nature of this sort of commission is going to have us ruffle the feathers of police unions, right? Qualified immunity. And I don't think it's a bad idea to seek, private legal representation, not only for ourselves, but for the city of Northampton in general. That's it. Those are my only thoughts.
Thank you. Namdi?
Yeah, interested to see what it would cost to retain counsel. Coming back to my issue about budgeting matters, that sounds like a high ticket item. And not against the arguments for why it would be good to have that kind of advice. And I wonder whether getting it from an academic legal scholar, as opposed to someone who's kind of in practice privately, could serve a similar purpose. So, would if you went for a professor in a law school or something, who might give us counsel at a cheaper rate, just as an alternative idea.
Thank you. Javier?
Two things. First, sorry, JC. Second, we have to remember that the city solicitor is the city's lawyer, but also the police department attorney. So let's that sink a little bit. So that's, at least for me, I don't know for you, but it should be enough reason for us to be able to have an independent counsel. I mean, we would need somebody who knows municipal law, who knows criminal law. So I don't know how I feel about a law professor rather than sort of a practicing attorney. I don't know, but I think that it's something that we certainly need.
Thank you. Lois?
I think it depends on who the law professor is and who the practicing attorney is and what their experience is. So I wouldn't necessarily, I think it's an interesting idea, Namdi's suggestion. So I'm not saying it has to be a lawyer. I want someone who's familiar with the legal issues, and maybe it would be more than one person, depending on what issues there are. And so maybe it could be someone, a law professor, and maybe it could be a lawyer, depending on what the issues are. So I'm not wedded to either one of these things. I just think it's important for us to acknowledge that. I think my feeling is that the commission at some point will need other legal advice outside of the city attorney, however that worked out.
Thank you, Lois. Booker?
This is really presumptuous, but I'd really be curious to hear what David Hoos thinks about this discussion.
That's funny. David has his hand up. David?
Yeah, I guess my feeling is that I don't. The problem is I don't know what we're going to need a lawyer for, and it seems to me we would be doing better to wait until an issue arises so that we know exactly what we're looking for. I mean, if you need someone who knows about municipal law, that's going to be somebody different than somebody who knows about civil rights law or criminal law. A lot of questions about criminal law and civil rights litigation, I feel quite confident that I can be a resource on. For municipal law, I know nothing about municipal law. But if it's a municipal law question, it may be the kind of thing that the city solicitor can answer. And if he can't, I think he would tell us, look, that puts me in a conflict. You need to get other counsel. And, I don't think there are a lot of options out there for people who have expertise in municipal law, but just using that as one example, we could probably find someone, but my own feeling is I don't think it's really a good use of time to be talking about it now when we don't even know what questions we want the lawyer for.
Cynthia? Thank you, David.
Yeah, I think this is an important issue that we shouldn't, well, I don't think we're ignoring it, but I'd like to advocate for a B plan because I think a request like this, I don't know how it would be received. And let's just say we don't get the money for it. But I think there's a lot of people in town that might want to do this kind of work pro bono. And we all may know that person or people. And so that would be my suggestion, that we sort of think about, okay, the B plan. And as the questions come up, this pro bono person, whether they know union contract law or municipal law, can shift us at least in a direction. But it would seem to me there would be a person that we would have that we could sort of call our own, particularly if they're in a pro bono situation. So just a recommendation.
I just want to put my hand up after Lois.
Okay. Lois. And then Dan.
The reason it came up was it was part of a discussion about the budget for the commission. And if there was going to be money that was going to be spent, how much money the commission had allocated to it. And did we want to say it's possible that we might need money for an independent counsel? That's the reason it came up now.
Thank you. And Dan.
Yeah, I just want to second that. I think it's important that we think about this and at least start the process. I think everyone here knows that requesting funds for things is going to take time. And depending on what happens, we might have very short time periods in which to respond, especially given that we're a public entity. So, the police unions took issue with a lot of things or with some things that happened during the commission, during the city council meetings, and they had a very short time to reply. We are essentially in that same position where we want to make sure all our I's are dotted, T's are crossed, but also to make sure that we are protecting ourselves, or at least are prepared to protect ourselves if there were questions. I'm not going to specifically say retaliation from the police unions, but I mean, especially if we end up with a report that says we should reduce police funds significantly or reduce their power or influence, that does put us in a position where we might want an independent counsel to protect us.
Thank you, Dan. Alex? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, the Dan spoke to it, but the issue of timing, it takes a while to get, if the funding request has to go to the mayor and then the city council. The city council can do 2 readings if it's necessary in the same meeting, but often we have things go over 2 votes. So thinking about what we want, what we expect now, even if we never use it, seems appropriate.
Thank you. Javier? You're muted.
I was going to make the same point that Alex just did. I mean, having the discussion and making it and put it on the table, it's necessary, even if we ended up not doing it, or we later on in the process we use it. What I would say, I would go against the idea of for free work, pro bono work. If we're gonna have, if we decide eventually to have counsel, that council should be honored monetarily. I'm not up to, everybody brings their own talents and their profession, and if we're going to be bringing somebody to advise in the specific matters, I think that person should be remunerated.
Thank you, Javier. I agree. Everyone should be compensated for their time and their expertise. Cynthia.
Yeah, I just want to make clear that my recommendation was only if we put the proposal forward and we do not get the money, and only if it takes a long time. We might just want to have this in our back pocket. So I appreciate the comments about compensation. But I have a hunch we're going to need something like this, and it may come sooner than later. So
thank you. Namdi?
Just to say that there are, some professions that think differently about the need to be compensated for the work, and some have ethical standards that, kind of lead them to choose to do pro bono work routinely. I myself am a psychologist who bills, an hourly rate, and on this commission in part lending expertise and doing so at no extra compensation. And so there may be plenty of people who have that same kind of view, and it doesn't necessarily cheapen their contribution. That might lead us to be able to get a better quality person in that way. So different perspective on that.
Thank you. Can I propose that we move forward with perhaps creating a proposal, maybe with a couple of different options? Alex.
If one person wants to take that on, then we don't need to do a public subcommittee. They can just do that research. But if more than one of us does, then we would have to do a subcommittee and post that meeting.
Thank you. Boy, do we want to, Lois? Hi, Lois.
Alex, I mean, are you saying that we need, that a person or persons needs to form a committee to decide what this person, I don't know what this person would do, or just that we think that there might be sometime during the life of the commission a need to hire an independent counsel, and that, I don't know how we estimate what an amount of, I mean, since this is part of this budget conversation, how much money we estimate that might be. I don't know exactly, what would these people be deciding past saying that they think it's a good idea to have it.
I can just directly respond. My point was, yes, that I'm assuming that we're going to a place where we want to request, we would like a certain amount of money to be set aside for us for our event, our possible use for this purpose. And if one person wants to research that amount, what that amount should be, then they can, actually many of us can do that independently. We just can't talk about it until we come back together. Or we can have a subcommittee like we did for translation that is going to be a posted meeting and public to determine that next step. Or we can try to figure that out now all together. Those are just our options there.
If I could just respond. Maybe we could just, I mean, since we've talked about this a lot already, maybe we could, somebody could throw out some ideas about what they think might be. I mean, I have no idea in terms of a sum of money, because I have no idea about hourly rates for people, like, So, I mean, I don't know whether, saying $2,000 is way too much or outrageously small. I don't know, because we don't have many hours, and I don't know what the hourly rate is. But I don't know if people have other ideas, but maybe we could try to resolve this now rather than form a committee and then have another discussion about it.
Thank you, Booker. And then Carmen.
I was going to say, I'm not going to help by making a motion about this because to me it's too ambiguous an idea at the moment. And I'm taken by David's comments about we don't know what we want or who we want or what the question would be. So it's not something I would be for at the moment.
Carmen.
Thank you for that, Booker, because I'm on the same page. I can't say that I can put a price right now, a dollar amount, if we don't even know what we're seeking yet. So I think the important question is, how do we request? I think I'm guiding towards that discussion. And then if we need to put a dollar amount, then at the end, we can make that decision. But it's hard for me to say because I agree with pro bono. I myself have done pro bono, and I mean, that's what we're all doing this right now currently. So I have no issue with it. But I do want to know what we're seeking before we start putting an amount out there and requesting.
Thank you, Carmen. Any further thoughts, comments? Lois? You're muted.
Well, I mentioned some things that I thought we might need an independent counsel for. And then so did Javier. So we already have some ideas out there for what that might be. So it's not, maybe the amount isn't nebulous, but I think the idea to me is not nebulous, even though we don't have a specific question that we're going to ask a specific person. I think at some point we will have a specific, oh, Dan also talked about it. So, I mean, I think that three of us have spoken about specifics. So it's not, I mean, we don't know that those are going to be the questions. I'm just saying that I think there will be questions, and there probably will be questions that we would want an independent counsel to consult with us on. And so even though we don't have a dollar amount now, maybe I would make a proposal that that the commission believes that we will at some point need to consult with an independent counsel, and that the amount of money is still to be determined, as is the person. I don't know. That's my proposal.
Thank you, Lois. Namdi?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So again, very interesting discussion. I am persuaded that legal counsel could be useful. I'm not persuaded yet that we need to, formally request it as a budget item now. And I guess so for me, I'm curious. I'd like to hear more discussion that leads me to understand the urgency to deal with budgeting this now. Is there some reason why we couldn't raise this for a budget item at some future time? To this end, I'm intrigued by something Cynthia said. Maybe it was just a speculation, but Cynthia said something like, I have a feeling we might need this sooner rather than later. I wonder if there is a sense that there is something on the immediate horizon that we would be really sorry if we don't have somebody in place. And if we do feel that way, maybe it's time for us to start to generate some names. We already have David Hoos, who has said, if these kinds of questions come up, I feel comfortable. He's on our committee. That's one person. Cynthia suggested there's a person that she's got in mind. Maybe it's time to kind of at least get that name, start to find out, is that true? So that if there's a feeling of urgency, there's somebody we have in mind. There's some people who are not, so at least we know we're protected if there's something we're worried about. And then we might at a later time, once we have a clearer sense that are we going to be in court, being litigating for years? I mean, that's a different person than somebody who's answering a couple questions about qualified immunity and what the limitations of that might be. So again, so I'll turn it, I don't want close by asking Cynthia if she could just elaborate on what I thought she said about having a feeling that we might need this sooner rather than later. I wonder if there was something to that, and I'll stop.
Cynthia? Yeah.
Thank you, Nandi. I think that's more of a terminology that I think in the future we're going to need this, because I started to just exploring, some different things as all of you have, I'm sure, and we're going to get in the weeds of the police department from a lot of perspectives, and it's very difficult to know just yet, as we're trying to formulate this structure and foundation for how our committee work is going to go, where we might feel a little cautious about stepping into certain things. And so I don't have anything specific, and I thank you for bringing that out. And I sort of judged by the tenor of the conversation that maybe we're just not ready yet. But I do want to put myself forward as feeling pretty strongly that this would be a good thing for us to have. And maybe if we can't articulate it yet in the form of a budget proposal, as you said, why do we need to do it right now today? And so maybe it's something that comes along a little bit later. And if any of us know individuals that might would want to work on something like this, whether it be pro bono or not, we'll get some more information. So I hope that answers your questions, but thank you for asking that.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Thank you. I'm also very, I've been trying to think about, again, why we would need legal counsel and framing it in why people ask for legal counsel. I think there's especially a body like this, and thinking about it in terms of the risks that anything we're deciding or anything we're going to be putting forward would cause to us personally, any of those personal risks, being sued or those sorts of things. And so there's a need to look for independent counsel because there's some level of risk that is associated with what we're doing. And when that risk kind of, why that's triggered is usually because of the level of authority that you have based on what you're putting forward. And so I just want to try to frame it back to what our level of authority is in terms of our recommendations. I mean, we're not city council. We're not, we're offering a set of recommendations whereby the elected officials and the mayor are meant to then, again, look at the legalities of what we're proposing, and or create new laws that will be able to allow for the recommendations to exist. So I'm just trying to think about, again, what naming the specific risk we think we have, or is the legal counsel around I think there's another reason for legal counsel, which could be, we don't get the data that we're looking for, and it's being, obstructed somehow, and there's a need to try to get some additional support to do that. But otherwise, I just want to kind of set us back into the place of what authority this body has to move forward with, and keeping that in perspective. We don't need to kind of figure out all of the different pieces of how something might be implemented necessarily, but we do want to offer the recommendations based from a values perspective, from the best knowledge that we have on this committee and the research that we're going to do, and be in partnership with the elected officials and the mayor to be able to do that in city departments. But I just want to try to, I'll stop there, but I'm still struggling with the why. What risk we think we personally have, or this committee has, in order to be able to use city funds for independent counsel to protect us somehow. I'm not sure that that's necessary. I'm not convinced yet that that's necessary. Based on our positioning of our authority here. That's all.
Thank you.
I just want to raise my hand again, but I'll go after everybody because there's already a line.
There's a line. Javier?
I want to two things. The first one is People mention the city solicitor, and he may be able to answer a lot of questions. I just want to remind you, the city, again, the city solicitor is the city's attorney, it's not this commission's attorney. In appearance, may look that because of his title, and this is sort of created within the city, he's gonna give us all the sort of legal talk about responsibility, liability, but at the end of the day, the appreciation and the judgment, depending on how good or hopefully there are good questions that are gonna be, make proposal tangible. His answer is gonna base in his interest of representing the administration of the city. And I want to be really clear with that. So if you're thinking that the attorney that is not, it doesn't have to side with anybody, no, the attorney side with the administration of the city. That's it. And the other thing that I would say is, even though I really, really appreciate David's offer, I personally don't think that would be appropriate for a voting member of the committee. At the same time, giving legal advice. I think everybody has their own opinion, and for a matter of transparency, I would prefer to have outside counsel, so we can freely speak our minds and not fall into so I don't know how to say second readings of what we're saying, or try to find second intentions of certain judgments.
Thank you, Javier. Cynthia?
Yeah, just, Elizabeth, thank you so much for reminding us that we're submitting recommendations. And on a pragmatic note, my rationale for wanting independent counsel is I do not want those recommendations to be subject to someone saying, you can't do that, it's illegal. I want those recommendations to at least have another pass through someone who is outside of our world and the work that we want to do, but understands a much broader picture from a legal perspective. So that's one pragmatic reason I would suggest that this is something that we need to do. And I would agree with Javier, we can't, the city solicitor is the city solicitor, and I think we just need to remember the protection of interest, and say we do something like, and I'm just throwing this out here, because some of the open comments said, your job here is to abolish the police department, and so say that's what we decide to do. Well, we all know that can't be done overnight because of union contracts. A contract is a contract. I mean, I think it can't, but who knows? Maybe some legal counsel will tell me that it actually can. And so it's those kind of knotty things that I think we're going to get into that I would think we would need counsel for.
Thank you, Cynthia. Alex, and then Dan.
Yeah, Cynthia spoke to most of what I was going to say. But yeah, basically that the city solicitor may come back and say, no, that's not what you should do. And it should be our right to seek a second opinion. And so we could wait until potentially that happens, or we can be ready for that sooner. So yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, so I think sort of wrapping up at this point, at least what I think I've got. So there's, on the one hand, questions about what we are doing as a commission, and the sort of reactions to what we make as recommendations. There are also the aspects of asking questions that would put a person representing both our interests as a commission and another city entity, putting that representative in conflict. There's also questions about that we might have, again, where it might even be outside of the expertise of the solicitor. So some of the things that we're going to be doing are along the lines of state law and city law, where we might be putting them in contention. And I think ultimately, even if I don't think we need to come up with we expect 15 hours of work at X amount of rate at this point, but even exploring, so having somebody put together a list of potential individuals who the city could contract out with, because again, if we go the route, even if we make a request for funds, it still has, like, there's got to be vendor licenses, there's got to be city agreements, all of those sort of behind the scenes bureaucratic aspects to this. So even if we don't say we have a specific amount of time or a specific amount of money, if we can at least start getting folks into the city system as potential contractors, getting all of the paperwork started so that if it needed to happen, at least it's a little bit closer to being completed than it would be otherwise. So just starting to at least explore those things so that we are ready. I think we've already talked about, there is a lot of process that goes into actually hiring somebody for that. And so doing as much of the legwork as we can beforehand without actually necessarily committing to anything might be something we would explore.
Thank you, Dan. Lois?
I agree with what Dan has said. I agree with what Cynthia said. I think maybe at this point, both to have a way of submitting recommendations for people through a central person, whoever, we don't have a staff person, but whoever, maybe the co-chairs or something, I don't know if that's appropriate. But also to move on the idea that, or to get a sense of the commission that we think this is something that we will need, and to be affirmative in that, and to do that. And that's sort of where I began with this, that I think we will need it. And to have a sense of the commission that you're either in agreement with that or you're not in agreement with that. So that's what I think now.
Thank you, Lois. Booker?
Does somebody want to make a proposal for this?
Anyone? Lois, you unmuted yourself. Were you gonna? Lois.
Yeah. I think I unmuted myself. Yes, I don't know exactly the proper language, but my proposal is that the commission agree that we believe that it's important for the commission to have an independent counsel available to us to do our work in the future.
May I, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's a bad habit I have. I actually agree that we should have our own counsel if we need counsel. What I'm not sure about is, will we need counsel? And that's why I'm having a hard time with this discussion. Because I actually think our commission is a advisory committee to the council and the mayor. And we are not going to be able, we might say abolish, but I'm not sure what legal, it doesn't matter to me what the legal ramifications are. So if, Lois, from what I'm hearing, if we need, I guess, the way I might suggest doing a proposal or a motion is that in the event that that the police commission requires counsel in order to do their work, that we have funding for outside counsel for that purpose. I'll stop there. But I think that's what I hear you asking for.
I think that is what I've heard as well.
Yeah,
Lois?
yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that we can't, I think if we are going to come up with recommendations, and the recommendations have to do with existing contracts and agreements, then we might want to consult with somebody, not the city attorney, but somebody outside of the city to find out if that's viable, for example. And I mean, that's another example to me. So I'm not saying that's going to be the thing. I'm just saying that there seem to me that there will be things like that, even if they're just recommendations, because we're not going to want to make recommendations that are not viable. And we might need to consult with somebody about the viability of those, in which case we might need a counsel. So I agree with your proposal or motion.
So I'll be glad to state that as a motion. I propose that in the event that the police commission requires the use of counsel in order to do our work or make our recommendations, we would like to have access to outside counsel in order to do that work. I'll stop there.
I second that.
Shall we vote? Oh, Nick.
I just want to understand that because it's a hypothetical, we want access to outside counsel. Is the focus of this motion to access funds, and then we choose the counsel, the outside counsel, or does the city have a role in choosing the outside counsel? Because we talked about them hire. Dan mentioned that there might be vendor licensing or something like that. I just want to clarify, what would the process be? We decide we need a counsel. We need counsel. We decide the area of expertise that we're seeking. And then what's the process in obtaining that counsel? Because we've had a number of suggestions, including pro bono.
Alex, and then Carmen.
Yeah, so the co-chairs who have been in communication with the mayor, I wonder if this is something that you all would be willing to, if we pass this motion, be in communication with the mayor to get a sense of to fully understand the process and bring that back to us so that we have all that information.
Yes, I would be willing to do that. Thank you. Carmen?
I was wondering if we can, I was kind of thinking the same thing that Nick was, if we can make an amendment to the statement and put in of our choosing, of the commission's choosing for counsel. I just wouldn't want to have to use someone that has ties to the city. If we can make that choice. And also, did we want to put in an amendment in as far as like the budgeting? I don't know how to word it, but that term or that concept, that discussion wasn't put in there. So I don't know if we just kind of, I'm going to move away from it, or are we going to somehow plug it in there?
Before we get too deep in, I would actually, I think, given that we'll have some conversation with the mayor at some point around a lot of this, and that's going to structure the possibilities that we explore at some point. I would say I would actually move to table this until the next meeting and have this be an agenda item for the next meeting before we go too deep in into a proposal.
I second that. Was that a motion? If that was a motion, I second it.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. And I also want to recognize that we have 40 minutes left and we still have a significant amount of items on our agenda as well. Is it okay if I move us along? Okay. So I've been taking notes and we can.
Alex's hand is up.
Oh, hey, Alex. Yeah.
Hi. I don't know how strictly we're following Robert's rules of order, but if Booker were to withdraw his motion, then that would there would be no that would solve the problem, I believe. But if just a informal discussion of tabling is sufficient, then that's fine as well.
I don't know Robert or his rules.
Yeah.
I cannot answer that.
So if you move to table this, we need to vote to table it.
Okay.
I'm more than glad to withdraw my motion if people are willing to let that occur. I would like to withdraw my motion that I placed before.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, subcommittees. There were two different options. One was based on, so there's three, we had three different, but now we have four subcommittees, which I feel like complicates things just a little bit with the assignments for this. There were, oh, thank you, Dan.
Oh.
So Dan has shared his screen.
Make that a little bigger. I can't see it. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So just to start us off, there were 14 responses, one non-response. If we go, so there are really two different ways, and there's a number of other ways we can go through this, but the first way was just not adjusting the commission size or the subcommittee sizes at all, and just going with everyone's first choice. That's this unadjusted one here. So the policing policies and services subcommittee would be Nick, David, Carmen, Namdi, and Cynthia. The spending and contracts would be Lois, myself, and Josie, and then Booker, Alex, Larissa, Dana, Michael, and Javier. And then Elizabeth would be not on a committee, but then could just choose where to go. So, and they would be on the alternative to policing or no committee. And then the last, I just did a really basic rank choice because everyone was pretty distributed evenly, as you can see. So basically taking the same, but then adding Elizabeth and one person from the alternatives to policing subcommittee to the spending and contracts to make it even. So there'd be 5 people per subcommittee. And so the way that I grabbed those, it was just the one person who was unassigned. And then there were 2 people whose second choice was the spending of contracts, and I just did a Google coin flip. Originally I'd set up like I was going to do the Hungarian like choice algorithm, but like there was such evenness among the subcommittees that it didn't make sense to run that through. There are a number of different ways we could also go about this, and if we're adding a third committee, whether or not we want to sort of table this and add them, which is a little bit much. I guess waiting a week, and then the other idea. This is also just with people's first choices. It's not accounting for if people wanted to be a member of more than one subcommittee either. So I'm going to leave that up to folks. I'm not sure how they want to. Does anyone have any strong feelings or questions or anything like that?
One second. Michael and then Carmen.
I just wanted to say, well, first, thanks for the poll, and then also for taking all of this and putting it into these lists here. I'm happy to go to my second choice, in part because I think it's good if Alex and I split up. That would be my first thought, and then secondly, I do think, again, I'm one of 15 here, but my thought on kind of an equal number of participants in each committee is a good idea.
Carmen.
Yeah, I know that we had talked before about possibly doing a commission subcommittee for translations, but I was curious, now that I'm looking at this, wouldn't it be one of the areas that is discussed in policing policies and services? I just wouldn't I think if we did another subcommittee, I think it would minimize the amount of members on these subcommittees. So I think it does make sense to just, it'll be one of the areas that's discussed in the policing policies and services. So I don't think that we have to have another subcommittee, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll raise my hand after Alex.
Alex.
Yeah, so the translation or interpretation subcommittee, my understanding is that is a shorter term committee than, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be, that purpose of that one was to come up with the proposal, which would then go to the mayor and the city council as far as to meet our needs for that. And so that as opposed to these, which are ones that, perhaps we'll be meeting every other week in between our full meetings, so that the shorter term one, a few people, if they're willing to serve on that, could be on multiple ones, but briefly.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was essentially my understanding as well. Like that the policing policies and services, you could definitely make a request to know what they use and how they deploy that and how they involve community members to communicate. But I don't think that was like that. They wouldn't necessarily be making recommendations for how this commission functions. At least that's my understanding. So we would need to have a second. So there would be some people serving on multiple committees or multiple subcommittees, or some people moving from one subcommittee to another.
Nanti.
Yes, hello. I'm getting the impression that in the course of our work, it's likely that we will spontaneously create other subcommittees. I mean, this is the first time serving on a commission like this. Maybe others who are more experienced can speak to this, but I think these three, I guess I feel like we shouldn't feel like the existence of the translation committee needs to change these three fundamental committees that, again, as Alex said, has a longer purpose. I guess what I'd like to sort of have an agreement that we probably likely will be creating other subcommittees in the future out of tasks that we just can't do as 15 people, and which means inevitably we'll probably all end up serving on short-term subcommittees, more than one, over the course of this work. That's my sense, unless someone thinks that's not correct. I'd love to hear from anybody who's more experienced.
I would like to propose a motion that the translation subcommittee is separate from these. Is that?
Second.
Is that something that we need to vote on? Alex.
So I believe usually how it works is the co-chairs are the ones who decide who is on the committee, and I really appreciate your collaborative approach to that. But if we have, I don't think there needs to be a motion if we have general agreement that you can make that decision.
Thank you. Booker? You're muted.
I would be glad if you would place me on the agenda for the next meeting to make a proposal to our commission of what we might be able to do in terms of providing translation services for our group, rather than forming a subcommittee to discuss that. And at the end of that proposal to the committee, I would then be open to, do we need to have a more of a committee process in order to do that? What we do in Human Rights Commission is that one person works on an idea and then brings it back to the commission and does it as a proposal. And I actually think this issue around I've got to say, I've heard some really good things from everybody about what the concerns should be. And I would like to do the experiment of making a proposal to you of what that might look like rather than forming a fourth. I agree with not having a large fourth committee at this time. Would you be open for that?
Thank you, Booker. Yes, I would be. No. Alex.
So we already voted to create that committee. To undo that, would we need to vote again? That would be my guess.
Could you read back the proposal that we made? Because I don't think the word committee was in my proposal.
I think it was subcommittee.
And the reason I use the word subcommittee is, to us, that's not necessarily a large body that may not need to meet in under open meeting rules.
Alex, did you?
Yeah. What I have heard from the city solicitor is that if we charge more than one person with any task for them to work together, then that is a subcommittee or committee, and that has to be a meeting that is open to the public.
That's why I've just asked permission if you would allow me to do it by myself.
Right.
To make the
my
proposal
point was just that I think we would need to take a vote to rescind the vote to create a subcommittee or committee, as we've already done that.
Could the original wording be read back just to check on that?
Laura, are you able to read that back?
Sure, just give me one moment to get to that.
Thank you.
So I'd like to raise my hand after
Okay.
Michael.
Move to form a subcommittee that will format a proposal to improve access for our meetings by investigating providing translation services for those that we determine to be necessary for this committee, with a plan for making a proposal to the mayor.
So at least what I'm hearing in that, there's no numeric ties. So I think if we had a subcommittee of 1, that would still meet what we voted on. Does anybody else have a different reading of that?
Alex?
I guess I'm kind of over my head in the legal. I don't understand all the legal issues, but so I don't know if a subcommittee of 1 would still have to be an open meeting and Booker would have to hold an open meeting, or so I'm a little confused about that. My thought, I think if we are just going to task this to 1 person, it's probably best to rescind that previous vote and not have a subcommittee.
I guess before that, is there anyone else that had like an overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I really want to work on this proposal? If there were other people that really wanted to work on it, then I'm not hearing any yeses. Booker, would you like to rescind your original motion? You're muted again, Booker.
I would be more than glad to rescind my prior motion as long as people are still interested in allowing me to make a proposal about the interpreter service, developing a more accessible platform for the workings of our committee.
See a thumbs up. I see lots of thumbs. Lots. Alex.
I'll second that.
Oh, do we need to vote on that?
I think so, because it was a vote, and so to take it back, again, I'm kind of guessing here, and if anyone knows more, but it seems safe to do that.
Okay, Michael was shaking his head very serious like, so.
Yeah, I think so. I think we have to vote because we already voted on it.
Okay, so we will vote. Lois?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Javier?
Yes.
Dana? Yes. Namdi?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Josie?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
And Larissa is not here. So that was a yes. So thank you, Booker. We will put you on the agenda for next week. Are we good with subcommittees? I think I heard us say the ones with the equal amount of people. David.
I would move to accept the subcommittees as created by the co-chairs, if we need a motion for that.
Which one?
Second.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to have the equal amount. I just wanted to put out there that I actually think I would be more helpful in the Policing and Policies Services Committee. I'm happy to serve in any of the committees. I just don't think I'll be as helpful in the one I was placed in.
If it would make sense, just to keep it even, I would be willing to switch with Elizabeth and go into the spending and contracts if she wanted to switch to go into the policing policies and services. And I have to apologize. I have an 8th grader who's working on census homework, so I'm sorry that you hear the background discussions.
Yes, thank you. So there's a motion to accept the adjusted subcommittee membership, which was seconded.
Second.
Do we need to vote on this?
I think so.
Yes.
All right, we will vote on that. So we are voting on option B, adjusted. Lois,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
Booker,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Javier,
Yes.
Dana, yes. Namdi,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Josie,
Yes.
Cynthia.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, processes and requests for data information. Dan emailed the mayor, and I'm going to read the response around how do we request data and information. The process for requesting information from city departments that are not already publicly available should be the co-chairs making the request to the mayor on behalf of the commission. All requests should be as narrow and specific as possible to minimize cost and facilitate the release of the information. Sensitive information will need to be redacted to protect privacy as required by law. Elizabeth.
Oh, sorry, just need to put my hand down.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm usually pretty good at putting that down. Josie.
Sure thing. So it sounds like we need to, we as a commission have to ask the co-chairs to then request information from wherever we need to request information from. Personally, I would love to see information on how many instances of police use of force, how many munitions were fired. I would love to see a lot of just transparency in our police department with as little redaction as possible. Of course, that might be a pipe dream, but I want specifics, right? In order for this commission to really do its job properly, we need to be armed with as much concrete and transparent information in terms of policing practices, use of force, what type of calls they are responding to, what were their budgets used on, what are their overtime hours, who's using that system and things like that. How much money is used for out of court settlements, and where does that money come from? Is it taxpayer dollars, or is it taken out of their pension or something along those lines, right? I would like to get as much information as possible out of the police department.
Namdi?
Yeah, it strikes me that it'd be good to know, in a sense, what is publicly available in that response. And I feel like I don't know that. So if there's any guidance that we can get to, for example, where should we go to kind of know what the police department willingly communicates to the community, and so we can start to do some kind of cataloging about what's missing, so that in terms of Josie's comment, kind of what do we run in, where do we see blind spots? I think that would help us in a sense to then formulate those narrow questions that they're asking us to formulate. I don't know if anyone on the commission feels they already know the answer to that, but I don't, and that's kind of one of the most fundamental things to me is what's already publicly available. Where can we go to look at it?
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Thank you. So there is Northampton participates in an open portal data program that they've been participating in, I think, since 2014. And so they're actually have already accumulated, and I've actually been collecting a lot of that data for over almost about a year. And so I do have a good sense of what's publicly shared. There are also the police logs, which are also logged since I believe July on the Northampton website. what's notable is there's some days in those current logs since July that are missing. So I'm, I think requesting the days that are missing from those logs to be, I don't know if it's just like a website error or what, but those days need to be, those logs need to be gathered. But the other piece that's missing that I think is really critical, and I think it's really being able to compile those, what's listed in the open data compilation from 2014, the logs, and also the computer-assisted dispatch records. There's specific days that we might want to get some of that information as well. So I think, again, it's just really compiling those three pieces together that we can get some good requests. But there actually is a good amount of data on the website.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Lois?
Is this a discussion about trying to figure out now all the data and all the information that we're going to request in the next 6 months? Because for me, once our committees start meeting, we'll have many more ideas about what the holes are, what's available, and what the holes are for what we're going to need. It's great that Elizabeth can do, maybe you can share it with us. I would love to see what you have, and probably other people want to see what you have. But I can't begin to start asking. I can have like big categories of what, budget categories now, but to me, I'm just beginning. So I can't, I can say, yes, I want some, but I can't say what that sum is right now.
Absolutely. I thought I was just relaying information, not necessarily collecting requests for information at this time, because I don't know if we have enough information to know what we're requesting.
Yeah, can I just clarify?
Yeah.
That is just from last week. I had said that I would reach out to the mayor and clarify what the process was, and it's just that everyone knows, if you want data, if it's as a subcommittee, as an individual person that you think this is useful for the whole commission to know, whatever that data is, just let we'll say both Dana and myself know, and we can relay that request to the mayor, who will then start the process and gather that information. But the key is that it does need to be as specific as possible. We can say redacted to the minimal degree. Whether that, there's all sorts of laws around privacy in terms of what that becomes, because anything that they do give to us does become public record. So we do have to sort of straddle that line, because we don't want to put victims of or people who've interacted with the police at risk, or violate their privacy. But we do want as much information as we can have in aggregate form or an individual case study form to move forward. So once those requests start coming in, we'll pass them along as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, I feel like Josie just started listing some really interesting questions that are on many of our minds. And then Lois said, are we starting to talk about this yet? And I don't think we are quite yet. I really think the subcommittees really need to get going on this. But I do want to ask if Elizabeth can share how we access that portal, or I'd be very interested to know of any already available public access points. And that would be very helpful if we could distribute that.
Yeah, Elizabeth just shared with me the link, and I will make sure I get it out to all of you.
I'd like to raise my hand after Alex.
Okay. Alex?
I just wanted to clarify what you said, Dan, because is it correct that any individual can request any information, or is it, my understanding was that that the group needed to request the information, and that could perhaps be the subcommittees would be empowered to do that. So could you clarify that?
Yeah, so if anyone needs information to pursue their work on the commission, we could make that request to Dana and myself, and we would pass that along. The goal would be making sure that Dana and I are not duplicating requests, so that, I mean, in theory, it would be wonderful if everyone did everything as a subcommittee, but that may not be possible, or you may be looking at different things to report to your subcommittee that you will then report back to the commission as a whole. There's a whole bunch of scenarios out there, and it's just using Dana and myself to make sure that requests aren't duplicated, so that if you had a request, but someone on another subcommittee actually had a request that was very similar, we can just be like, look, here's that information already, we've got it, versus going to fetch it. But I don't think that a request has to come from a subcommittee itself, because it will eventually come from the commission itself through Dana and myself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lois?
Just back to what you were just saying, Dan. I mean, when you get it, let's say different subcommittees start requesting information and you start getting that information, I think it would be at least interesting for me if the policing committee was getting requested information that that I would like to know what information the different committees are requesting and what the answers to that is, because it seems like it would be useful in me thinking about budgets and all of these other things if I knew what other information people were gathering, and that it would be more useful to know sooner rather than later what that information was. So if a committee is putting out a request and you get information, maybe there's a way that all that information could be posted somewhere and we could see, oh yeah, that's interesting, and we could tap into that and use that to, in our work rather than waiting. I don't know what we would be waiting for anyway, but so that's my suggestion. Share it.
Yeah.
There's a way we can create a spreadsheet or something that can.
Yeah, something.
What is
So we're still waiting to hear back from the IT, the city IT department, about creating a shared file and data storage space. That should be up hopefully pretty soon to get that going, and that would be a place that both becomes available to commission members to add content to and information to, and see what else is coming through. So we would have spaces for shared data. So what comes through those requests organized to the best of our ability. I did want to make one thing, because I did have a comment, and it's related to what Elizabeth said, because I started digging down the rabbit hole of all of this data, and even worked with another person before this commission was formed to sort of put those logs into like a searchable, like into an actual usable database, because it's not particularly great. So another person scraped the data. I dropped it into Jump just to do a little bit of data mining. But a lot of what's publicly available at the moment is pretty sparse. So it doesn't include things like what's the race data for all of the logs that are coming through. When the logs are put in, sometimes there's a couple of words as a descriptor of the entire interaction, and so really it doesn't let you understand what was happening in those instances in all cases. So I think we can start with what is available, but also be prepared to, when you read it, go like, wow, I have questions. And then we'll be able to dig deeper. But just as the caveat that not everything that is in that public portal is really going to be useful or in a format that we can easily extrapolate from. That was all my comment was.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to move us along. It's 8:24 and I need to be done by 8:30. Scheduling meeting times for commission and potentially subcommittees. The next item on the agenda. I think the last I remember is that every other Tuesday. I had to leave early last week, so I'm not sure if there was more that was discussed after I left. Hello, Alex.
Yeah, so the current schedule would have us meeting next Tuesday based on the schedule we established originally, I think. But if we want to start doing every other, then we would meet next on the 20th. But then we have the problem of election night, which I think we're all agreed we don't want to meet on. So then we could just do 3 weeks and then be back on the 10th of November. So that's kind of, or we could do it 2 weeks in a row at some point. That's my thoughts about it. I'll wait to make a motion till I hear from others.
Thank you. Lois?
I was thinking that committees would meet, that the committees would meet in the off week. So one Tuesday at whatever time would be committee meeting, and then one Tuesday at whatever time would be the commission meeting. And I don't know what to do about the third, but generally that's what I was imagining. And maybe, to deal with third by sort of, well, I don't know what to do about the third. But so a weekly meeting, either commission or committee.
Thank you. Nick?
My understanding was that we agreed to meet every other week, and that we added last week to get public comment. And then this week would put us on that biweekly schedule, and that subcommittees could meet on the alternate weeks. That was what I got from our previous meeting, from the first meeting.
So next week would be subcommittee.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Alex, did you have a motion? Or anyone?
Before, I guess that sounds great to me to alternate. I guess I would like to hear anyone's thoughts, and we don't have to decide this now, but about whether we should do whether we should have 3 weeks without us meeting as a whole group, which is skipping election night would do that. So we would meet October 20th and then next on November 10th.
Yeah, Josie?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a million different ways we can do it. One idea that I have, I like the 1 week on full group, 1 week on subcommittee. Due to the very nature of subcommittees, I don't think everyone here has to be there for each individual subcommittee kind of meeting. And so my thoughts would be, not next week, but the following week would be all of us together again. And then next week we'd do subcommittees where we maybe block out 3 hours of time, and each subcommittee takes an hour where they're like kind of, where their group kind of are the ones facilitating and talking and raising their hands and participating and whatnot. But maybe that's a little convoluted.
I'm sorry, did you say 3 hours of time on sub?
Yeah, I said 3 hours, but you wouldn't have to be there for all three. You'd only have to be there for your subcommittees 1 hour, if that makes sense.
Got it. Alex?
Well, in the interest of time, I will make a motion that we next meet as a group on October 20th and at the same time frame, 6 to 8:30. And then again on November 10th. I'll just maybe leave it at that.
Second.
Second.
And we could always add additional meetings as the whole group as needed, but our next meeting would be 2 weeks from today.
Namdi?
Alex, would it make sense to add in something about the subcommittees into your motion, just so we could do one vote as opposed to 2 votes? I don't know if you want to do that, but it sounds like you're proposing a full commission meeting, and would you want to just add in a sentence about the subcommittees in the off weeks, and then we can just have one vote and get out of here?
Yeah, so we could meet, that there's sort of some complexity there. I mean, the subcommittees could choose the times that they want to meet. They could be simultaneous, which would mean that the public would need to choose which one they were going to be. There's Josie's idea. It's a bit more of a perhaps complicated issue, though. Meeting on the off week certainly sounds good in terms of our schedules.
But it's possible to meet subcommittees simultaneously. But if we do that, we would be forcing public to choose which one. That's one challenge.
Right.
That's good to hear that about that issue.
I guess I would hazard a motion just looking at the time. So I'm going to make a motion that we meet next Tuesday from 6 to 8:30, and that we establish a pattern of meeting every other week, with the exception of election night, which would establish a break in between, and that during the off weeks when we are not meeting, that the subcommittees have the ability to schedule their meetings that meet for their that work for the committee members.
So subcommittees work offline at their discretion to schedule their meetings. We don't have to get that. That can be done because scheduling doesn't have to happen in our meetings. It can happen off. It sounds good.
Okay.
I can second that.
Discussion?
Yep.
Can I speak?
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to the hands that were raised, but I was muted. Sorry, Lois. I'm sorry, Cynthia. There were other hands.
That's okay.
I don't, so wait, so the next week, which would be the 13th, would be a meeting of the full commission. Is that what you're suggesting, Dan?
No, we would skip next week, and we would meet October 20th.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought, okay. So the next meeting of the full commission, and then it would be up to the commission, the individual committees to set their own time to meet. Is that it? Days and times, not necessarily on the off week.
That was my feeling. Just, I know one of the hesitations of the commission members before was meeting every single week on a Tuesday is not necessarily feasible for everyone. So in smaller groups, you might be able to work and find more flexibility in schedule times for folks.
Okay.
Javier?
I like the idea of having like in between week for subcommittee and the weeks on the ends for the larger group. But and I don't know this, maybe Michael or Alex, how many days in advance has to be posted that the subcommittee is meeting? That's one thing.
2 days.
2 days. So that's one thing to. So, and the second one, I would hope that when we convene back with a bigger group, the subcommittees would report the work that they had been doing. So that those two pieces of information may be important to shape how we are going to end up deciding how the subcommittees are going to meet.
Thank you. Alex?
To go after.
So, yeah, I don't hear any difference between Dan's motion and my motion, other than to explicitly say that the subcommittees would meet in between the other meetings, and they would set their own schedule. Is that correct? We're still talking about the 20th. October 20th is our next meeting, and then November 10th.
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm, very much in agreement with that. I think we can merge those motions.
Thank you. I second those motions. Cynthia?
Just a reminder that, as Javier indicated, this is an open meeting. The subcommittees are open meetings. So the scheduling, the agenda, everything has got to be done ahead of time, and everything needs to be done in an open fashion. So all the subcommittees, I guess our only option is that we're going to have to do it via Zoom. And so the logistics of setting all that up, et cetera, is something that we'll have to think about.
Thank you.
Oh gosh.
Can Alex?
That makes a good point, which is who is going to set the agenda of the first subcommittee meetings? If we don't have a chair or vice chair for them, so maybe we just want to set a blanket agenda for each of them, which is discuss the scope of the determine what the scope of what we're going to discuss. And
Can I raise my hand, please?
Yes.
Is it do you think it's too much of a task or an order to ask if it's 3 subcommittees, if we can meet one at 6, one at 7, one at 8? I know it was briefly discussed a couple of minutes ago in a different fashion, but I know that sometimes these meetings go a little bit longer than expected. So is it too much to ask that we do an hour for each so that the public is able to watch all 3 of the subcommittees instead of having to pick and choose which one they go to?
I think for me personally, to do every Tuesday evening is really hard. Like right now, I really need to wrap it up and get some children into bed. And so if I like the option of if we have a smaller group to be able to schedule something a different day and using this as a default if we can't find another time. Nandi?
We just promised to record the subcommittee meetings if people miss them, and that way they can be seen at other times. Just, I think offering the committee some flexibility. Again, we're all doing this free, and I think recording it is a nice compromise.
Thank you. Javier?
Well, because they are public, subject to open law meeting, they have to be recorded. That's one thing. And the other, I mean, so far, an hour doesn't, I mean, I don't think an hour is going to be enough for this group on the subcommittees around it. Just saying that. And the other thing is that depending how the subcommittee is run, also can be open to public comment.
Michael?
That's really what I was going to say also was the public comment part. Again, it's a public meeting, so you do need to take that into account. And I think Javier's right. The hours goes quickly if you give 59 minutes to public comment. But that said, I think I almost wonder if we couldn't go with the idea for next week of having the 3 subcommittees meet at 6, 7, and 8.
or 5:30, 6:30, and 7:30, something like that, each for 1 hour, just because it'll almost be like an organizational meeting for those subcommittees where they'll, then we could, pretty easily, I think, unfortunately, putting more on Dan and Dana to kind of set what those 3 organizational agendas would be and get it done that way. Just at least for the first one, pardon me.
Josie?
Yeah, I'd like to second Michael's kind of proposal. I thought it was pretty good, if it was a proposal at all.
Lois?
I agree. I mean, that was kind of Josie's original idea, like have them consecutively, but I agree that probably once we get into it, an hour isn't going to cut it. But maybe for the first meeting of each group, an hour will be enough, or will have to be enough. And then we can move on from there. So I agree.
And in the organizational format, I don't think you'd have to take public comment when you're just kind of establishing the ground rules.
Are we voting on this? Yes, Booker?
First, I think we need to vote on, do we agree with our next meeting being on October 20th and 2 weeks after that? And then I think we should have a second vote for how we do that meeting next week if we choose to do that. To me, they're 2 separate issues.
Okay.
So I'm going to call a vote on the motion that's actually been made twice and seconded twice for the next meeting in 2 weeks.
I second that motion.
I just want to be clear that the motion that was seconded, my motion, did include language for subcommittees meeting as well.
I'm saying that that's a third motion, and that's we can decide on after we first say let's have the next meeting in 2 weeks. There are actually 3 motions sitting on the floor at the moment. So that's why I'm calling the vote on the first 2 motions, which call for the next meeting to be in 2 weeks.
I mean, if we're going procedurally, there's not 3. Mine was explicitly that it included the subcommittee, so there would only have to be 1 vote. So I'm happy to withdraw that and leave it as a second, or leave the subcommittees as a second one, but I explicitly included it to have the subcommittee, so there would be only 1 vote.
Alex?
Yeah, I think I indicated that I wanted to merge the 2, and that but the only part of Dan said that we would meet in between weeks, but I don't think you said on Tuesday nights necessarily. Is that correct, Dan?
That is correct. I left it up to the subcommittees to decide when they would meet.
Okay, so if we vote on that, then we can take up the issue of explicitly saying for next week we would meet in this certain format of 3 hours. So I support calling Booker's Booker calling the vote. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll figure out the next week. Is that acceptable?
Yes. Okay. So are we ready to vote on that? Awesome. Lois?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Booker?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
David has left. Alex?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Javier?
Yes.
Tana? Yes. Namdi?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Josie?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yep.
And Marissa's not here. That has passed. So we are meeting. Oh gosh. I'm sorry. Do we need to vote again for the 6, 7, and 8 time for next Tuesday? Or do we need to propose this? I would like to motion that subcommittees meet back to back next week, 6, 7, and 8.
Second.
A second. My third. Michael, I didn't hear you.
I'm gonna call your names one more time. Lois?
Wait.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm waiting.
Yes.
What's the order?
I'm sorry. It's
The order, like which one's meeting first, second, and third?
One second. Policing will meet first. Spending will meet second. Alternatives to policing will meet third.
Thank you.
Josie?
I rescind my hand.
Oh, okay. So back, Lois?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Booker?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
David? Is gone.
David left.
Yes. Alex?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Javier?
Yes.
Dana? Yes.
I'm going to vote no to discourage excessive voting and subverting the point of the last vote, which was to not do this. I think, and hopefully get us to end on time at some point in the future. So no.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes.
Josie?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
And Larissa is not here. So that we will be meeting 6, 7, and 8. We will create the agendas and no. Did I not say Nick?
5:30, you said. That 6, 7, and 8 is okay with me, but you said 5.
5:30. I think I said 6, 7, and 8.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you did. 6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8.
There was a suggestion of maybe 5:30 or starting at 6, but then the conversation continued with 6, 7, and 8.
Okay. We will create the agendas, the subcommittee agendas, and get those out to you. And
Move to adjourn.
I'm going to adjourn.
Are we there?
No.
No, we have new business, which I will motion to move that to next week.
Oh.
Lois, did you have a?
Yeah, I wanted to at least bring up a topic to be discussed on the agenda next week. And that topic is hearings.
Hearings?
Hearings.
Okay.
That would be for the 20th then.
Yes, I would like to have that as an agenda item.
Okay. Thank you. Were there any other items? Okay, I would like to motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Good night.
Night.
Why am I the people?
Good night, everyone.
Good night.